Representative Tom McClintock has represented California's 4th congressional district since 2008. Welcome, Congressman Tom McClintock.
Well, thank you, Mallory, for having me.
I'm thrilled to have you here.
Well, same here.
Before we went on the air here, you were telling me you're in a jungle primary.
Well, California changed its election law a couple of cycles ago, so there's no party primary anymore. The parties don't select their own candidates. Everybody goes on the same ballot. Everybody votes on that ballot, and the top 2 candidates, whoever they are, then go on to the general election. That forces all the third parties off the ballot, and it's opened itself up to candidates coming in and trying to manipulate the field.
Well, so what does that mean to you? What's going to happen?
Well, we had a situation in my district where a candidate came in, coordinated with the other candidates to move out all of the Democrats. I'm in a safe Republican seat, so he's trying to produce a Republican-on-Republican race. He succeeded with all but one independent who refused to be muscled out.
So you could be technically running in a general, or not technically, you could probably be running in a general against another Republican.
Right. And we've also seen other districts, by the way, where candidates will have phony candidates, that is, candidates who don't have any intention of pursuing the election but are simply trying to divide up the vote. It's a system that is fraught with difficulties, and unfortunately that's what California has willed itself. I think the worst part about it is the third parties that often have very sharply divergent views that need to be aired. Are kept off the November ballot by this process.
Wow. How did California go from the Golden State to a basket case in one decade?
Well, really from the same policies that destroyed Detroit, the same policies that the Obama administration is pursuing.
What are those policies?
Well, the service bureaucracies were highly unionized. Spending was allowed to go out of control, and the regulatory bureaucracies began running amok, and that's what you've got in California today. AB 32, which was California's attempt to save the world from global warming, never mind that's been going on since the last ice age, is systematically shutting down entire sectors of California's manufacturing economy, and you've got a huge exodus of jobs and population out of the state now.
Now, you're considered a conservative. You're going to you have a Republican running against you to your left, but you also have a state that's kind of screwy in its own right. I mean, what would you like to see your state do?
Well, I think California is going through a political epiphany right now. It has been living with the result of leftist environmental policies now for a generation, and the result is skyrocketing electricity prices, one of the highest.
But we've had Republicans in the governor's mansion as well.
Well, that's the problem, and those Republicans have pursued very democratic policies, and the Republicans have been blamed for them. But the policies themselves are now becoming very much discredited. A decade ago, Californians voted overwhelmingly for the so-called high-speed rail, which is a $70 to $80 billion boondoggle that will get you from Los Angeles and San Francisco in 2 hours longer than it takes to fly there. Public opinion has now turned radically against the high-speed rail. We had a House Natural Resources Committee hearing in Fresno, which in the Central Valley of California, an area that's been absolutely decimated by these leftist environmental policies. 1,000 people turned out at a rally to protest those policies, and most of them spoke Spanish. In that region, a Republican was just elected to the state Senate in a district that's 61% Latino and 51% Democrat. So things are changing even in California.
Now, you're going to have an opponent, but in my opinion, what I've seen in polls, you're going to still be a congressman from California, and I'm very pleased about that.
Thank you.
But the real issue that I want to talk about is, what do you want to see done? What specifically would you like to see done in California? And then we'll get on to the national stage.
Well, the same problems that confront California are the problems that confront the nation. You have to bring spending under control. You have
How do you
to
bring
reduce
spending
the
under control in
regulatory.
California?
You have to reduce the regulatory and tax burdens that are crushing the economy. And where do you begin? You begin everywhere with fundamental reforms of the system. For example, the education system. A generation ago, we were spending about 1/3 per capita or pardon me, per student on the classrooms as we're spending today, and yet we had a far higher quality of education. Why is that? Well, we managed things differently. The teachers were in charge of the classrooms. The principals were in charge of the teachers, including the authority to hire and fire, and the parents were in charge of the principals through the local school boards. Since the state and more recently the federal government have seized those prerogatives, we've watched the quality decline and the costs skyrocket. We've unionized, we've bureaucratized, and we've centralized the public school system, and it does not work. There's one example out of the many reforms that are necessary to restore the kind of prudent government and effective government that we once had, that provided the basic services but otherwise left people alone to make their own decisions over what kind of light bulbs they'd have in their homes, how high they'd set their thermostat, and how much water they'd put in their toilet bowl.
Now, you've had a drought in California. How has that impacted your area?
Well, droughts are nature's fault. Water shortages are our fault. We've not built a major reservoir in California since 1979. Meanwhile, the population has nearly doubled. Everybody thinks the Colorado River is the mother lode of all water in the western United States. It's a junior sister to the Sacramento. Sacramento's got more water in it. The difference is we store 70 million acre-feet on the Colorado, but only 10 million acre-feet on the Sacramento. Most of the rest is lost to the Pacific Ocean.
Congressman McClintock, bottom line, you got to build more reservoirs.
Exactly.
And you got to move the environmentalists out of the way so people can get water to drink.
And we've got to stop calling them environmentalists, by the way. They're not supporting the environment. You know, I represent the Sierra Nevada. The timber harvest in Sierra Nevada has dropped 80% since the 1980s because of these leftist so-called environmental policies. Meanwhile, the acreage destroyed by fire has increased proportionally. All of that excess timber is either carried out or it's burned out. When we carried it out, we had healthier forests and a thriving economy. And since the environmental left has taken over, we've seen increasingly severe and devastating forest fires and infestations of pests because of the overgrowth that's been allowed to occur.
Let's get to some of the national issues. Immigration. Where do you see immigration going in the Congress, and where do you stand on it?
Well, in my view, it's very simple. We have a path to citizenship. It's a path that is followed by millions of legal immigrants who come to our country with a sincere desire to become Americans, to see their children grow up and succeed and prosper as Americans. They have waited patiently in line. They've done everything our country's asked of them. I don't think it's fair that 11 million illegal immigrants should cut in line in front of them. Legal immigration is what built this country. But the only way you create one great nation from all of the nations of the world is through that process of assimilation. That's what our immigration laws were written to support. If we allow illegal immigration, then there's really no point to legal immigration anymore, and you've destroyed the very foundation that makes a nation of immigrants possible.
Isn't that going to be used against the Republicans in the upcoming midterm?
I don't think so. You know, there's been a lot of work on this by Sean Trendy, who's the chief political analyst for Real Clear Politics. And the points that he's made are very compelling, not the least of which is when you poll Latino voters departing from the polling booths, a majority of them either don't think illegal immigration is an important issue, or they do think it's an important issue and they vote Republican. It is not a monolithic community out there. Like I said, what we're seeing in California is that jobs and a thriving economy trump a lot of these divisive issues that the Democrats would emphasize, and we're seeing that now in political shifts that I think are going to continue.
Congressman McClintock, one of the problems with California, one problem is water. Another big problem is energy. I mean, we see the energy prices there just skyrocketing, making it somewhat difficult for industry to really move in.
Oh, and it's going to get worse next year when the final tranche of AB 32 regulations take effect. I've talked to executives at companies with refineries in both Northern and Southern California, and they tell me quite independently the same thing. Next year, it's going to be impossible for them to continue to run those refineries under the rules that they have to face.
So what are we going to do?
Well, in California's case, we're going to be a lot sadder and a lot wiser if those refineries shut down. California, because of its
Wait a second, Congressman, are you suggesting that because of energy prices, some of these refineries may shut down?
No, I'm suggesting because of AB 32 regulations, refineries in California will no longer be able to operate. And
so they may shut down.
And at that point, prices, which are already anywhere between 10 and 50 cents a gallon more than the national average on any given day, are going to skyrocket.
They're going to go up much higher.
Absolutely.
Do you have any idea? Would you want to conjecture where you see them going?
No, but I can see what the public's going to do. They're going to rebel. And again, we're already seeing signs of that all across California.
You've been a staunch supporter of the Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
Constitutional issues are important to you. Where do you see our country going in terms of the Constitution and abiding by it? I know your answer, but I want everybody to hear it.
We've watched the Bill of Rights under siege for years, and it's become a catastrophic problem now with recent revelations of NSA spying on millions of Americans through their phone and internet records, something specifically forbidden by the Fourth Amendment. But what we're now also seeing is a decay of the basic structure of government within the Constitution. When the president can assert authority to pick and choose what laws to enforce, what laws to ignore, or assert the authority to develop new laws that the Congress has specifically rejected, that is leading us toward a constitutional crisis. If we tolerate that, if we allow it to continue, I'm afraid that we will begin to resemble Edward Gibbon's description of the Roman Republic when he said that when the executive power overwhelms the legislative power, the Constitution and liberty are lost.
A lot of Republicans are saying that Obamacare is the holy answer to getting the Senate and increasing the majority in the House. Is Obamacare really what everybody's going to run on?
I think Obamacare has been a catalyst. Most people tuned out of the debate long ago when they were promised, if you like your plan, you can keep your plan. If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. This past year, they've discovered...
If I may, Congressman, I like my country. I'd like to keep it.
Well, here's my point. They discovered that was a lie.
Right.
And not only are they re-examining their approach to that, they're re-examining all of the other things that they've been told by this administration. I mean, think about it. The people who are the most supportive of this administration are the very same people who've been the most harmed by its policies. That's a political disconnect. It can't last. And I think that Obamacare has gotten an awful lot of people starting to think about the proper role and size and scope of government again. So even though it's a single issue, I think it relates people to a lot of other issues that they're also dealing with, not the least of which is an economy which 5 years after all the stimulus spending continues to stagnate, while we're now staggering under a huge new debt as well.
You're a senior member of the House.
Oh, no. I'm in my...
You're relatively
I'm
senior.
in my third term.
That's relatively senior.
I'm just old, is what you're saying.
Do you think that the... you think Obamacare will be replaced with something? And if so, what do you think it should be replaced with?
Well, first of all, we need to recognize that even with all of its flaws, America had the most advanced, accessible, and affordable health care system in the world. Those flaws, that system needs to be restored, and those flaws need to be fixed. And the Republicans have put forward a large range of legislation to do so. For example, we give huge economic incentives to employers to go out and select a plan for their employees. Why don't we give those same tax breaks to the employees themselves so they can afford to go out, choose a plan that best meets their own needs, a plan that they can own, that they can take from job to job, and that they can fire if it no longer suits their needs? Why don't we expand the health savings account so people can meet their health care costs with pre-tax dollars? There's so much that can be done, and a lot of it means restoring freedom to a system that's been robbed of that freedom by government regulation over the years.
Congressman, if you got a call from the president and he said, tell me one thing I should do to help our country, what would the one thing be that you would tell him to do?
Well, we have to balance the budget, and Republicans now for the fourth year in a row have passed a budget plan that will eventually restore fiscal solvency to the nation and begin paying down the national debt. That by itself, I think, is the single greatest threat to our nation. Mike Mullen, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said that was the greatest national security threat to our nation, and that was 4 years and $4 trillion of debt ago.
Congressman McClintock from the 4th Congressional District, California. We look forward to having you back here many times as you become more senior, not by age, but by longevity in the United States House of Representatives.
Thank you.
Great having you here. Thanks.
It's a pleasure, Mallory. Thanks for having me.